Welcome, everyone. It's Andrew Beach. I'm a teacher of self-education. I help professionals like you communicate your value to find great opportunities faster, whether you're working or not. Today, it's Friday, 3 o'clock p.m. Pacific time. That means it's happy hour somewhere. Let me know where you're joining from. I'm in Portland, Oregon today. Love to hear where you're joining from and that you can actually hear me. So I will also put in the chat here a welcome message. And you can come on live actually and get hands-on coaching, one-on-one by me. I might be able to answer some of your questions today. We do have a topic, something that I was thinking about that I think might be helpful. So you can come on live if you mute the platform you're on. That would be really helpful. That way we don't get any kind of a echo. So it's good to have you. Let me know where you're joining from. Kansas City, Tracy, good to see you. Excellent. Come on live if you mute your audio, a link in description. Good. Welcome, everyone. Good to have you. It's career happy hours. My friend Terry Smith would say it's the career cocktail hour. So good. Let me know what questions you have. I'm happy to answer. The topic I really had today, and hopefully we'll bring Terry on and he can chime in, or if you have a specific question that I can help answer, is a lot of the questions I had this week revolved around just generally understanding how a company makes a hiring decision or how they go through the process of hiring, and what is the role that you play in that as a job seeker. It's funny because I started thinking about this. I was like, well, maybe I should put together a flow chart just to show everybody. Charlie, good to see you. Thanks for coming. Teresa in Los Angeles. Looks like we have a handful of folks in Los Angeles. Good to have you. My anticipation is that when you come here, you're open to networking, that each one of you, as you participate in this community every Friday, that you will cross-pollinate, if you will, that you will see somebody in the chat and you guys will connect and follow up with a conversation, because we all know the number one way to find work today is through the networking piece. So I would encourage you that if you're coming here, number one, share this. If you're on a platform like LinkedIn or wherever you're sharing, share to your social channels. Just click the little share button down below. I'd really appreciate that. Most of the folks that join typically come through LinkedIn, and that's fine. But I do archive these on YouTube. So if you want to go to YouTube and watch, that's fine as well. I'm platform agnostic that way. So I started thinking a little bit about, what does it mean to understand the hiring process? And I was going to create a flow chart that described that, but then it dawned on me. Hi, good to see you, Terry. Terry's here. Welcome. It dawned on me, I had already created a flow chart that kind of described this. Now, it doesn't really address what may be happening, but it could certainly be extrapolated to the current state of affairs with hiring, the pandemic, everything being done remotely, and really just to kind of wrap your head around how your activities can overlay on a hiring process. So good to have you. Yes, cocktail hour coaching. Yes, you're welcome. I enjoy doing this. It's a way for me to pay it forward and to be a meaningful member of this platform called LinkedIn. I've been on it since 2004. I joined 2004. I was invited by somebody else. So I've been on LinkedIn for a long time. And so I have, I guess, some nostalgia around the platform, and I do appreciate what it provides us. That is a lot of information, a lot of data, people, their titles, the companies they work for. I think the platform is really instrumental in any professional wanting to execute on a networking process, which is why we're here. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. If you have any questions as I go through this, good. Thank you, David. Welcome from Huntsville. Hopefully I said that right, Huntsville. Anyway, good. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and hopefully the audio still comes through. We tried this once before. It didn't work out so well last time we tried it, so hopefully this will work this time. So I'm going to share the screen, but then I also want to make myself, I want to make this one a little bubble. There we go. Did it work? Hopefully it worked. I should be a little box in the bottom. At least that's the preview I'm seeing. So good. If it's working out and you can still hear me now that I've done that, that would be great. It's saying I'm on air. Restream, wonderful service. If you haven't even looked at it, I think there is a free version of the service. So I believe it's working. So this is I made a spaghetti diagram a while back. In fact, I wrote a blog post about this on my on andrewbeach.com, my website, and because I wanted to wrap my head around how do I kind of view, or how do I perceive the hiring process to work. So across the left column, right, if you see it, look at the left column, we're looking at the job seeker, which would be most of you, recruitment, meaning the people inside the company that are doing the recruiting, including hiring managers, and then an outcome, right? So typically most of us are on the left side of this diagram, meaning, hey, you know what? I'm making I see an online posting, I make an application, it runs down through the funnel called applicant tracking, and out of the applicant tracking comes a certain number of yes and no's. I think that's just logical thought process. So if we're looking at a hands-off, just online application type of job search, you're not really having a dialogue with anybody. You're just making your electronic submissions. Then you need to understand what that is going to result in. Now, these numbers may have changed. I did this 4 years ago. So the numbers were from a Wall Street Journal article posted in 2012. But for every 118 to 187 applicants per job, that was on average. My suspicion is with the pandemic, we're looking at probably 5 times that, several hundred. And it makes it very, very easy with LinkedIn having easy apply. You click one button, it's very easy then to get your application into a system. And so the odds there are not very good. What we're seeing here is that we're trying to get a number of candidates down to a manageable number for the recruiter so that they can vet those potential candidates for the hiring team, okay? On average, the recruiter invests about 9.5 hours vetting applicants per job. Now, imagine, if you would, for a moment, that each recruiter is likely handling dozens of requisitions. So that means they're spending a fair amount of time every week reviewing applications. Now, the ATS is designed to make that better, but it isn't always made better by their use of that system, okay? Now, many of us are motivated by our needs for unemployment benefits or some sort of employment compensation. And a lot of times we're doing this activity because we're told that's what we're supposed to do. And so we're taking this from a position of saying, I have to do this, I might as well do it. And so we spend a lot of time as job seekers making these type of applications. So that's, generally speaking, something that makes people feel, if you think about it on the surface, it makes people feel isolated, alone. There's not a lot of communication. The stuff you get is thanks but no thanks letters, right? So you can kind of see, or at least feel, what some of the symptoms are of that method of activity for you as a job seeker. You're just looking at online posting, making application, okay? I'm covering these up because there's a lot to share here. So I'm trying to take this one step at a time. So let's assume that's the electronic methods you're using. Let's say you just add something like telephone, or maybe even, let's say, outside of telephone nowadays, it would be Zoom or some sort of video conferencing. So you get more of a two-dimensional conversation going, okay? So what does that mean? Now we're looking at a dialogue. We're actually having a back and forth conversation with a person. Now, on the recruiting side of things, you could have gotten to the dialogue, if you will, as a job seeker through the applicant tracking system. You might have been filtered in based on your application resume. That happens. Okay, now I'm having a phone screen filter where I'm taking it from hundreds down to dozens, right? Just a handful that I'll then present to the hiring manager, okay? But guess what? You as a job seeker can, and I have it kind of covered up here, but that bubble that you see there is actually networking. And so, yes, you can execute your networking currently, whether there's an application submitted or not. You can actually execute that networking by the phone, by the Zoom, by the Skype, those sorts of things. Some people are actually doing it on Facebook Messenger. You can do them there as well. So don't think LinkedIn is the only place you should be doing that networking. My apologies. Forgot to turn off my notifications on my cell phone. Slap my hand. So, but out of that could come a couple of things. One, you could be filtered into through the phone screen or through the dialogue into an official interview process. The second thing is you could still get the thanks, but no thanks. You can then be filtered out of the process based on that phone screen performance. And the challenge I see it with a lot of applicants that then get into a phone screen is the job seeker then takes the approach that this is a filtering process, right? Rather than the objective of this is to get the next interview. So they're trying to say, here's why I'm the best candidate, not here's why you should have me for an interview with the hiring team. Now, I understand that's kind of a nuance, but the approach I would take in the filtering process with the recruiting function is I just want to get to the next interview. I'm not going from phone screen to offer or phone screen to declination letter, right? I don't want to make a declination or a rejection on behalf of recruitment. I want them to filter me into an interview process, if that makes sense. So how do I prepare for a screen? Well, first you need to know your strengths. What are your strengths? What do you bring to the table? Okay. Prepare your answers to the common questions. These typically the recruitment questions in the phone screen are fairly binary and rote. They have a list of questions they ask. They ask the same questions to everybody. There's no new questions per se in that process. So you can be absolutely prepared knowing what those questions are going to be. Like, hey, what are your salary expectations? I'm sure, if we bring Terry on, he could give us the 411 on what those questions are, because he comes from a lot of talent acquisition functions. So it's really helpful to have that information. And understand who you're meeting. Often when we schedule a phone screen, you don't know who it is. Well, look them up on LinkedIn. If it's a recruiter, where did they go to school? Learn as much as you can about the person you're meeting and extrapolate or customize your presentation to that person. Don't you think they're putting together a dossier on you? I mean, they have your application, they have your resume, they have a cover letter probably, they can see your LinkedIn profile. They know more about you than you know about them, that's for sure, just based on your application. So think about it from that perspective. And you may have your own questions. It's perfectly okay to ask questions at a phone screen or any kind of interview. In fact, that's the foundation of networking, isn't it? To build an understanding, to gather information. So that's what I call it telephonic, but it's a dialogue, something other than just electronic. It would be a video conference or somewhere you would have a conversation. So let's go three-dimensional. This is where you're actually meeting people in person, if you will, okay? And here you can see the phone screen can filter you into an interview process. Absolutely. So we're not saying that online application, you see a posting, you apply, you get through the knockout filter, the ATS, you get to the phone screen, and then you're in an interview process, okay? There's only a handful that make it into that process, right? So you're going from hundreds to dozens to a handful. But here's what this diagram is telling us is that networking can also get you into that interview process. Not that you don't have to make an application, right? So you're up here having three-dimensional collaboration, either on the phone or in person. And then they may ask you to submit an application, and then you're filtered in through the process. Absolutely. You could also go from networking directly to an interview process. That happens more than you would imagine. And out of that process, you're hoping to get an offer. Makes sense to most people, right? So this diagram, this process, this spaghetti thing that I put together, I think is really important to understand that there's more than one way to get to an interview. That could be direct application to interview. That could be through a phone screen filter process. That could be through the networking, right? There's more than one road to get to any place worth going. So keep that in mind. Now, I don't know about where you're at, but here on the West Coast, there's a lot of smoke in the air, and it's really kind of dried out my voice. So you may see me taking extra drinks of water today because the air is just not very healthy, and it's coming across that way. So I think you understand then in the interview process, in the three-dimensional column, you as a job seeker should really think of networking like an interview. Interview and networking, let's just assume those right now are synonymous, okay? Now, if they're synonymous and they're more alike than you know, the difference is that there's nothing on the line when you're networking other than a low stakes ask for information, advice, maybe connection to other people. Okay. With an interview, the difference is that there's something at stake. There's something on the line, and everybody knows it. Therefore, the approach is much different. That the others want you to like them, and you want to there's a like factor there, if you know what I mean. So there's more than one door inside. Networking is preparation for an interview, right? So every time you network, every time you share a story, every time you practice a branding statement with somebody else, you're practicing interviewing. So think of networking not as some big, over the top thing. It's a conversation. It's interview prep. It's just a meeting. And if we approach it that way, it's much easier to have a dialogue with somebody when you have a topic or something that you're thinking about, and then practice your accomplishment stories there. If they ask you, this is what happened to me when I got hired at my last job, is that I came into the situation, I had a network meeting, and in the networking meeting, it transitioned right to an interview. I had some interview questions. Hey, do you have experience doing this? Tell me about that. What did you have a role doing this? Because guess what? They don't have my resume. They're meeting me a lot of times, maybe for the first or second time. They don't have any of my things. I haven't made an application. And so if I'm networking and they don't have any of those items, then they need to ask me those questions. Now, the nice thing is when you have a dialogue like that and they ask you all these questions, guess what they're focusing on? What's important to me or what's important to them? Well, obviously, it's what's important to them. So I need to make note of, hey, they asked me this question. Why? Because that's what's important to them. What do you think should go on my resume now? And I have it from a direct person that might be a hiring manager. Exactly what they said or ask questions around. Who are the decision makers? And you'll know, I mean, if they start asking you interview questions and they want to filter you in to an interview process, they can do that. But the decision makers may not be the person you're meeting. So then it's like, hey, I need to get to that person. Well, that person will typically have a title, and you would ask, the ask that comes out of a networking interaction is, hey, who are the people I should be speaking with about my expertise? And would you be willing to introduce them to me? Practice and preparation. Practice and preparation. It's showtime. So those people that I think do really well on interviewing, they practice a lot. They practice their stories. They map out a process. They take it to the next level. They really do. And they're really good at that. So I'll go ahead and reveal the entire diagram now, because once you get through the interview process and you get an offer, that's your next step to employment and onboarding, where you hand off all of your administrative paperwork back to the HR talent acquisition folks. Okay. And then it's fireworks, right? The idea is there's fireworks at the end. And now I have a system, a process that I can leverage that way. Okay. So what are we trying to say here? Well, there's a way to shortcut this process. If we start with the networking, okay, we might be filtered right into the interview, get an offer, and have employment. That's the shortest, by far the shortest path to employment. Some people think it takes longer. Well, it could take longer. It doesn't mean it will take longer. What I've seen is that the more people you talk to, the higher quality of your presentation, conversation, quantity, strangely enough, leads to quality. So that's kind of so I built this spaghetti chart 4 years ago, and hopefully that's kind of piqued some understanding or perhaps elicited some sort of questions that you might have. So if you want, I can keep this up or I can hide it or make it a little smaller. Let me see if I could do that. Could I do that? Look at that. Look, I can make me big and make it small. That's cool. Okay, good. So if anybody wants to come on, this is the time where we'd maybe have some conversation. Absolutely, we could do that. If you have any questions, please go ahead and put those in the chat. Happy to answer. Absolutely. And then I think Terry said he might want to come in, so that's great. But I'm open. Put your questions in the chat. And certainly if you find this helpful and you think somebody else might get something out of it, please, by all means, forward it to somebody you know. And let's spread the word about this session today. Because it's every Friday, 3 o'clock Pacific time, and I'm welcome to provide any help that you need. Okay. Good. So here's a question. Thank you. Welcome, David. Good to have you. At what point would you change the strategy to take a job position a step down to get in the door? That's a great question. So what you're presuming is that you want to, what I'm presuming is that you don't want to take a job at the level that you feel you're qualified just so you can get in the door. And I think that's, so that what that is that's an arm's length job search. A lot of times what we're seeing is that, hey, because I'm not getting interviewed for this other thing, I should lower my expectations just to get in. And so that means in our little diagram here, if we're spending a lot of time, primarily our time, in the electronic method of search, then we're limiting our opportunities. What I found is if you shift gears, and you don't have to stop the online process, don't mistake what I'm saying, but you can inject some networking into that process. Certainly companies have a policy about influencing hiring processes, so you have to be cautious of that. Here, I'll turn this off. It's looking kind of weird on the screen. But David, I think really it's about saying, okay, what is my motivation for wanting to take something less? And being able to sell that to a hiring team is actually really challenging, because now I'm like 100% candidate. I meet all the requirements, and I may not have any perceived room for growth. And now I need to present myself to people who appreciate someone who will start anywhere. And that may not be the majority of companies in the marketplace. So good to see you, Erica. Welcome back. Amazing. Excellent. So Terry has an observation here. Add to your list the notion that many in-house recruiters aren't deeply experienced. That is true. It's an administrative function. And we have to recognize that the people reviewing your application may not have subject matter expertise in your domain. That's just the fact. And so keep that in mind as you go through this process, that not everybody has the same expertise you do, and they're just looking to get somebody to the next phase. Okay, their job is to get you to the next phase in the process, or to filter you out of the process. Either way, that's just their job. Okay, I'm gonna stop sharing that. That's much better. Okay, that's what was messing me up. I was still sharing that screen. Okay, yeah, Terry, if you want to come on, go ahead and come on. The link's in the chat. Happy to do that. Looks like there's, I've got another person in here, Craig. So maybe we'll get Craig into the mix too. And so whether it's Craig or Terry, just make sure that you mute or close out the window that you have the live stream on, so that you, if it's on LinkedIn, I mean, because we can hear that. So excellent. Yeah. Hey, Chelsea, good to see you as well. Helpful and appreciate. Yeah, I mean, I appreciate that. You know, I do what I can to add value to the community. And this is a community. I consider it a community. And I would encourage you, if you haven't yet, to go ahead and let's see. Let me just see. Yeah, Yasmin, I would actually take a look at all the people in the chat, whether it be Chelsea or Terry or anybody else, and reach out to them on LinkedIn with a connection request. And I'm sure everybody here is open, hopefully they are, to having conversations with fellow members in the team. Okay. Good. So it looks like Terry's here. Let's see if we can get him in. Craig is here too. So Craig, if you're interested, you know, I would encourage you to activate your webcam and everything, and we could certainly bring you in at some point, if that makes sense. So good. All right, let's see what Terry has to say. Let me get this worked out here, Terry. My apologies. This is what I want right there. And for some reason, there we go. Are you there?
Yes.
Excellent. Welcome.
Thank you.
Did you like my spaghetti diagram?
It's a good diagram. I think you got a lot of it, you know, pretty much right on the money.
Okay.
It's the process is the process can be very convoluted, to be sure, but by the same token, I think if you're in a position to where you can navigate through alternate means, it can be really, really helpful. And I encourage people to, you know, to think creatively about how to go about that process. You know, whether it's people you know, or you know, people that you know who know people that you might want to know, that sort of thing. You know, I mean, networking is it's not binary. It's additive, right? So there's always the next question. So
perfect. Well, so one of the things that I'm often asked, or at least proffered by the candidates or job seekers that I coordinate with, is they have this fear that, oh, well, what if the company has some policy that if I made an application, I can't talk to anybody there? I mean, draconian, yes, perhaps, but there is a lot of validity in the fact that they don't want somebody influencing a hiring process unduly. So that there's valid points on both sides. I just wanted to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a few organizations out there that definitely follow that pattern. In fact, I was having a conversation earlier today with somebody, and we were talking about one organization. I won't name them here, but they're very draconian about that, and they are. It's part of a new leadership initiative around essentially command and control, and unfortunately, they're following it pretty tightly. And I've had the experience of people that I know that work inside the organization who, they won't even talk to you about it. They talk about the time of day and what their kids are doing and things like that. But when it comes to that sort of thing, they've been given very strict marching orders.
Gotcha. Okay, so is that specific to hiring practices and the hiring process?
Yeah.
Or is that, I mean, obviously this is intellectual property, right? I'm not getting into those conversations, but if you approach somebody, I certainly don't advocate people approach somebody just based on a requisition opening. Hey, there's this requisition opening. I'm interested. Great, make an application, conversation over. It just isn't a very strategic conversation unless it's with a recruiter that has a need to fill that position. And they don't always answer the phone. Let's be clear, right? So I guess the perspective I would have is those companies really are responding to something that happened that was negative. So it's not any different than the Me Too movement or some of the other things that have gone on to where they were pinched or in some way responding to a compliance issue. Would that be fair?
Yeah, that's fair.
Okay.
That's most of it, I would say.
Yeah, and it's unfortunate.
Yeah.
There ought to be some, rules of engagement for people to have conversations, because quality of hire still comes down to what? More than just an application resume, for sure. It comes down to trusted relationships and, having conversations with people is part of that. I mean, how else are you going to recruit people?
Right. And that's the real rub. Again, another conversation earlier today around the notion of hiring managers having enough traction with the sort of the overall perspective of the organization and not being so terribly focused just on their particular silo that they have not only the awareness of how to frame the hire in the context of the whole organization, but also have the ability, to have those deeper conversations, right? As opposed to just checking boxes.
Yeah, well, part of that might be disclosure, right? If there's an open opportunity and it's disclosed that you're a candidate, then that conversation ought to be over, because this is not the context to have that conversation. On the flip side, if I made the application and didn't disclose it, and I don't want that to be the foundation of the conversation, there should be some rules of engagement there to allow that to happen.
There should be. I think the real challenge is that, there's, from a societal standpoint, there's no such thing. There's never been any kind of ground rule around this. I mean, even to the extent of things like, and this is kind of at the other end of the spectrum, but, there's this whole wisdom around, well, if you're going to leave, give 2 weeks notice, right? Well, there's no rule like that. There never was. It's just become a practice, a behavior based on some set of things that occurred at some point in time with some group of people somewhere, right?
Yeah.
And it just sort of became tribal lore as much as anything.
Well, I can imagine. I mean, the responses to even that kind of thing are unpredictable, right? Some people would say, "You're only giving me 2 weeks? Man, I don't know if I could transition to a new person that fast." From that end of the spectrum to, "Hey, can I get some boxes?"
Yeah.
No reason for you to stay. I'll pack your stuff up now and you can go now.
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's, yeah, I mean, so the only thing I can proffer in those cases is we are responsible for our own careers. And I know it's tragic, and some companies are doing their best to help their people engage in development and so forth, and some do it better than others. But ultimately, it's up to the individual to be their own advocate, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Good. Well, what else did you hear today in the presentation?
Well, so the discussion around the whole applicant tracking and filter mechanisms, that operate in that space. I mean, I think you're basically right on the money. The experience in talking about it from the other side of the table, from the experience of owning teams that do this work, right, is that the ATS, yes, it's a really annoying thing. And there's a lot of cases where we get, the recruiters get very irritable about applicant tracking systems because, oddly enough, as much as candidates will see the ATS as being kind of a hindrance in some ways, there are a fair number of recruiters, again, ones that are more experienced, more, deeply knowledgeable, that also see them as kind of a hindrance, because they are so structured and because they, kind of give you this much room to run when you really want more room to run to be able to have the kind of conversations you want to have. And some of that's compliance based, some of it's experiential, right? We want to be able to demonstrate, for example, that we are treating all applicants with the same general sense of structure. We're going to ask them all kind of the same questions, so that if anybody comes back and says, well, how come you didn't ask this person that question, or you asked this person that question, but you didn't ask this person that question? There's a natural need and a compliance-based reason to follow that line of thinking, but it is limiting, right? And so a lot of good recruiters get as much struggle with that as people on the other side, on the candidate side. So, and again, that's not to excuse it. It's just it's a fact. There are a lot of recruiters that I've worked with that just those things drive them nuts, and rightly so in some ways.
And you've probably seen this too. I've seen a growth in the title called HR. What is that? Recruitment coordinator, right?
Yes.
Which is just the administrative function to manage what? Well, to manage the interviews and the ATS and all the nonsense. I should say nonsense, but all the stuff that falls under the category of admin that is not value add to the candidate experience.
Yeah,
should fall in that category. Not that they're not part of the candidate experience, but that shouldn't happen face front with the the customer facing side of the business.
Right. Well, and if your recruitment coordinator is doing more, trying to bring as much as they can to the table, then my hope would be that person is pointing out and saying, look, here's where this isn't working as well. What can we do from a, configuration standpoint with the system to be able to improve this particular thing? And that's, for example, if I'm going to hire somebody to be a recruitment coordinator, if I need that kind of a role, that's something I would look for in that person, is how creative are you in terms of really looking at this thing? There's a difference between saying, oh, it's how it is, and what can we do to make it better, right?
Yeah.
And a lot of it's a matter of how the ATS is configured.
Of course. And does the recruiter have time to configure the ATS, and is that really in their scope of responsibility, even though it's a tool they use?
Well,
I mean, there's specialization happening when you get a large enough team, I'm sure.
Right.
So there is a question here, which I think is kind of interesting, Craig, which I think he's still kind of in the waiting room, if we can call it that. You were part of a large surplus layoff. What would be a good exit statement? I like the truth. That always makes a good exit statement.
Yep.
Truth is, large surplus. There was a reduction in force. Now, I would not focus on I was laid off. I would say, hey, I was part of an effort, an initiative. One of however many, 10% reduction in force, my position was eliminated, right? And then go from there. And then talk about an inspired future. So that what happened is just telling the truth. And the inspired future is what I'd really focus my time on.
Yeah.
We don't want to just lay an egg when we're talking. And, I understand there can be a lot of, emotion involved in sharing what happened to you. So I'm conscious of that because it's happened to me. I've
Mm.
walked in those shoes. So
Yeah.
I know what it's like to be shown the door, asked for my keys. Can I get your ID badge, your corporate card, your, whatever.
Mhm.
So what would be your advice there for Craig?
I'd say the same thing, Andrew. We used to have sort of an ironic joke way back in the day, in an HR department I worked in New York. When everything else fails, just tell people the truth. You
Yeah.
know, and in this case, there's no shame in that. You were part of a process that was really outside of your realm to control. And again, I've gone through the same thing. And it's hard because we place a high value on our work output and our productivity and our contribution to the organization. It's unsettling when the organization says, well, we appreciate all that, but we really don't need to have your role, not you personally, your role in the organization. That's a hard thing to swallow, but it's better to take it from that perspective and say, yes, the role was no longer required, but let's talk about what I can bring to you.
Well, yeah, they paid me to learn all these skills and to, there's value in the skill. And that's
Yeah.
what you need to focus on is the inspired future is all about the skill, the value you bring to the table, because guess what? It was validated by the W-2 wage you took home for however many years.
Right.
No one would pay you unless you were adding value normally. Okay. Now there is a caution I would have there is if your emotions are fresh, I'm not sharing how I feel about what happened to me. That's something I would say for my therapist or the EAP program if I need counseling to process the emotions. So even though I've been stung, I don't want to go ouch, if you know what I mean.
Right.
Is that I would share what happened, not how I felt about it or why it happened. It just did. It just happened. So it looks like Craig's here. Maybe we could bring Craig on together. You want to do a three-way call here? Let's give this a shot, shall we? Let me clear out this message. Maybe this will actually work. Hopefully, Craig, you have muted your thing, and you may want to move to your right just a little bit.
Okay.
Craig, that's Terry. Terry's got a lot of years in HR, and I'm bringing kind of a job seeker perspective. So we're kind of handling both sides of the equation. But was that a good? I think that was your question. Actually, did that help?
It helped greatly. Yeah. Obviously, honesty is the greatest policy. So I thank you for the input. Yeah, 27 years with the organization, a lot of great success, great experiences, but there's $3 billion worth of human assets being reduced in a reduced force kind of situation. They've been doing this for years, and fortunately, I was never really caught up in it until this year. So I'm grateful.
Oh, you're grateful.
7 years.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. Gratitude is a great approach.
Yeah.
So what is your superpower?
My superpower is my ability to communicate with people one-on-one. It's like I asked a question to a colleague of mine, and he was wondering why I was let go and not someone else that was in my same group. Eventually, they all got let go, but I was one of the first. And I asked him point blank, so what do you think that I have over this other person? And they said, some people have the it factor and some people don't. He goes, give you examples. When you're doing a presentation, people stop and listen to what you have to say. You're eloquent, you command attention when you're communicating. So my ability to communicate with people either one-on-one or in a group setting, he said, is my superpower. You need to focus on an area where you can use your communication skills to present the benefit value of service, product, whatever it is of the company you're representing.
Great. Craig, what is the best example of your work based on what you just said?
Greatest example of my work? Most recently was I was the product manager and marketing manager to the Walt Disney Company, not from my company, AT&T. I managed a process which is called a corporate alliance agreement. And so we worked in communication with Disney to kind of co-brand our products and services to our audience. And so I was very successful in making relationships with Disney people nationwide, and took the account from I think 1,000 new subscribers a year to over 10,000 in basically 2.5 years. So it was almost a 700% increase, 800% increase in productivity. So that was probably, of all the things I've done in my career, lots of things are kind of highlights. That's probably one of my top highlights, is the success I had with managing this really large and very important to AT&T relationship between AT&T and Disney.
So you were the face of the organization, so to speak.
I have been the face of the organization with many accounts.
Okay.
So my company's called on me to be kind of the representative of AT&T in a variety of situations, including also recently in our industry, there is the BOMA, which is the Building Owners and Managers Association. So I was the face of AT&T, representing AT&T to them. Also, some other real estate organizations, which were very critical to our success with delivering fiber services to our customers.
Okay. Any questions, Terry? For Craig? Observations in the way he presented himself?
No, I mean, well, yes. First of all, Craig, you're quite correct. You're very articulate. My first thought when I connected that you had been working with AT&T is that I have a close friend who's a senior VP at AT&T, and I'm halfway tempted to call him up and say, "Dude, what's the deal? How come this?" Come on.
Yeah, what's up?
What's up with that? So, I'm happy to do that. But I think what you hit on in terms of your superpower of, building relationships, I mean, that's so crucial, and realistically, I think, wherever you go and whatever you decide that you want to do, that's the wind to lean into, is to really look at it from the standpoint of, look, I know how to not only build relationships, but build relationships that make the organization a lot of money, right? I mean, clearly that kind of exponential growth that you created over a very, very short period of time, I'm sure translated into a few dollars on the bottom line.
Mm. Yeah, at least $6 million annually.
Okay, there we go, right? So that's a pretty powerful story, and depending on, what kind of environment you want to operate in next, I mean, that's a hell of a lead, right?
Right.
I mean, that's tremendous. And I mean, Andrew and I have talked before, and I'm sure you've heard stuff like this about the notion of being able to tell stories, right? And telling a really, really powerful story in the course of your interview process or your job search process. That's huge, and that is a tremendous story. I mean, I've talked to a lot of different people over the years, and to have somebody be able to just right off the cuff articulate, here's what I did, here's how much it did for the organization, and in a way that was very approachable and very easy to listen to. Awesome. Terrific.
By the way, I'm in California as well, so I'm the reason my eyes probably all red. The air quality out here is just absolutely horrible.
Well,
we can relate.
We can relate. It's already dusk here in Portland, although not naturally.
Not for another 3 or 4 hours.
It just looks like it out there. Yeah. That's the point. It feels like it's dusk because it's so dark. So we're with.
So hey, Craig, what is the one company you'd love to work for the most outside of the ones you've been?
I've had a passion for audio equipment. I would consider myself an audiophile. Yamaha is a company that not only has home audio and professional audio gear, but they also do musical instruments. That would be a company I'd love to work for, utilizing my sales and or my marketing skills. Harman International is another highly respected company in the consumer audio business. They also design theater solutions for concert venues, etc. So they have a pro audio group, they've got a consumer audio group, and Harman International has been a leader in the industry for many, many years. My passions outside of technology are consumer electronics, professional electronics, the automotive industry. I've been a automotive kind of fan for years. In a previous career, I designed and installed very high-end car audio systems into luxury and exotic vehicles. So I took my passion for cars, my passion for music and audio, and combined those to exceed customers' expectations. And that was probably 7 or 8 years of my career prior to getting into AT&T. So, consumer electronics or some kind of professional audio would be something I would be interested in doing. Absolutely.
Excellent.
So, Craig, do you know of a company called Meyer Sound, Meyer Sound?
Yes, I have heard of Meyer Sound.
Okay.
Interesting you bring that up, Terry. Is there someone that he should be speaking with there?
There's somebody I know very well that works at Meyer Sound. Craig, I'd be happy to do an introduction.
I'd love that. Fantastic.
So the process is you would reach out to Terry, connect with him here on LinkedIn, and then we'll move from there.
Yes, by all means. No, the guy I'm speaking of, he and I are friends for many, many years, and I would be very happy to connect the two of you together.
Excellent.
Cool.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Craig. I appreciate your question and for coming on live.
Thanks,
This
Sarah.
is the community. Spread the word.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's a great use of my time.
Thanks, Craig. Take care. Oh, that was good hands-on help there. I'm glad he was able to come on.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the challenge that a lot of us have is taking what we've done and, like Terry said, crafting those stories so that we have something compelling to tell people that they can remember, and not just a list of skills or, I've got all these great, strengths or anything. We're really looking for something that's compelling. And if I'm putting in my capacity to build trusting relationships that drive revenue, that's a key skill in most any business, especially now.
Yeah.
When companies might be needing somebody to sell more stuff. SMS, right? Sell more stuff.
Sell more stuff.
Yeah, good. I don't see any other questions here, Terry. Yeah, did you have any questions?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. Good. Excellent. Let's see. Question from Joel. Pardon me if you already answered this, but is the hiring process flowchart available for download? Yeah, you could probably get a copy of it on my website, andrewbeach.com. I think I did a blog post on it. Let me see. I wonder, is this something I could put? Do they allow those things in the chat? I'm not even sure I can do that. Let me do this. I will upload this little PDF into the cloud, and I'll see if I can put it in the chat or do something with it. But the alternative is, Joel, you could, I could share the screen again, or you could even roll back the video and just do a screenshot of it. That would probably be the easiest thing to do, or I can send it to you by LinkedIn message. That'd probably be the best option. Good. Any other questions out there? Again, we're here every Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific time, to answer your questions, give you some free coaching. I think it's valuable. Good. Let's see. I don't see any other questions. What is your sense of the marketplace right now, Terry?
Chaos. No, that's a little bit hyperbolic. My sense is that obviously the stock market is being very strange, and considering all of the socioeconomic impacts that are going on right now, you would think that the stock market would be doing something different than it is. For those of us who are in the stock market in any kind of extension, that's great, but we'll see what happens. From an employment standpoint, we're in a I don't want to call it a holding pattern, but it kind of is. I think that a lot of organizations are just trying to figure out how to get their collective head wrapped around whatever their new normal is going to start to look like. And so they're sitting on a lot of, work that needs to be done, work that needs to be figured out. There's a lot of organizations that are using this as an opportunity to really reassess what their commitments are to overhead, and by overhead I mean people. And so that practice has not yet played out. Obviously, we've got some scary stories about the airlines and things they're doing next month. But by the same token, there's a ton of organizations that are hiring, and I mean, I'm sure everybody on this link has already heard about the Amazon deal next week. Interestingly enough, ZoomCare is also doing a virtual career event the day after the Amazon event. And so there's a lot of that starting to manifest itself. I'm going to participate in both of them just because I want to see what it looks like. And especially given the hype that CNN has given to Amazon on this, it's going to be very interesting to see how this whole thing plays out. But I think there's organizations that are definitely hiring people. They may not be necessarily super plum jobs, right? But there is hiring going on, and there's a lot of it going on. It is a symptom of an employment market that's trying to figure out what's next. We've been barreling along in a certain pattern for a long, long time. The pattern just got exploded. So the question is, what does the new pattern start to fall out to look like?
Yeah, I think those companies that are positioned well, maybe even had surplus cash, are acquiring talent at a rapid rate, so that somebody else doesn't pick them up later.
Mm-hmm.
I think many organizations probably view this time as an anomaly.
Yeah, and
hopefully it is. Right? I don't want to, put a global pandemic next on the list of things that's going to happen. But it was my understanding, though, Terry, that Amazon thing, even though it was primarily for, various positions, mostly distribution warehouse, there was also a group of opportunities that they were talking about that were, jobs paying over $150K. At least that was the press release that I had read. Was that what you also read?
Yeah, I read the same thing. And so that's interesting. What's that about? Let's find out.
It looks like, they're also filling seasonal jobs because we're coming into they've had an increase, obviously, in usage. That goes without saying. But then the one I read was they're also hiring. Actually, it was, what was it? Jay Clapper is their new PR guy.
Mm-hmm.
So he was on, I think, CNBC or something talking about that. So, and here's a CNN. It says employees who fill the corporate or tech roles will receive an average pay of $150,000. So,
well, when you got the cash, you can afford to pay.
Yeah, well, when you got capital the way it is, right, and people are bidding up your stock, you've got capital.
Yep.
So,
absolutely.
Good. Amazon is hiring 33,000 new employees with an average compensation package worth $150,000. So that was the headline.
Yeah.
Which I think is reassuring to a certain extent. But
yeah, I mean, it's sort of journalistic hyperbole to be sure, but if you accept the notion that that's the average number, then clearly there's going to be some percentage above and below that, and what's intriguing is to say, okay, so what's number one, what's the number, if that's an average and there's a number of positions that obviously have to be above that in order for that to become the average, what are those positions and why are they hiring them in this way? Right. I mean, it's much more typical in organizations that are hiring high level positions to do it in a more network-based way than to just put out a cattle call.
Yeah.
So the question is why? What's the story behind that story? And I don't know the answer. And
well, the answer with Amazon is fairly clear. It's they hire for fit to not only the job but to their culture.
Yeah.
And if you don't meet the bar raiser qualifications, you don't get hired.
Right.
And so that means they're not hiring everybody just because they have to, which translates, I got to interview more people to make sure I've got a good fit. And they're not converting everybody to a position. Well,
and what it also suggests is that their traditional, lines of communication, their connections to those level of leaders are not creating the fruition that they need. Stated differently, if I've got an executive, or I've got a room full of executives, and I've got to hire 5 more roomfuls of executives, my room full of executives may not be delivering the kind of talent through their own resources, which is a traditional model for how you hire at high levels.
Mm-hmm.
So curiosity killed the cat here. Why is that the case? Why is it that Amazon's own people can't seem to find more Amazon people?
And I think that comes down to things we talk about in recruitment marketing and candidate experience and perception.
Yeah.
Right? That a lot of people have whether it's right or wrong, some sort of Hunger Games perspective on working at Amazon. That they work their people to the bone, and they work them on weekends, and most of them burn out within 18 months. Right? There's all these stories out there.
Mm-hmm.
But some of the people I've seen that have gotten hired there recently, they do have some of that characteristic, but I don't think they're the type of people that would accept a role that wasn't a good fit for themselves. They're smart enough to know that.
Yeah.
And I think the times are a changing. When you start hiring enough quality people, then the culture changes. And as soon as the culture changes, then the narratives change. So I don't know that they've hit that spot yet. Right?
That's a really good point.
There's a lot of demonizing still happening of Amazon, and some of it might be warranted, but most of it isn't.
Yeah,
that's just my perspective.
I think that's a fair perspective. I think some of it is definitely warranted, and I think a lot of it is probably not.
Yeah. Well, so we do have a question here from Kevin, and I'll actually flip this question back to Kevin. He asked, do you know what's next week's topic? Well, you tell me. If you're watching this and you have a topic or something on the top of your mind that you'd like to get perspectives on from us here in the community of, Career Happy Hour every Friday at 3 p.m. Pacific, then by all means, put some topics together and message them to me. I would be happy to look at those. It's tough every week, Terry, coming up with something to talk about.
Let me see what I can do.
Yeah, good. Well, if you come up with a topic, that would be great.
Okay.
If somebody else has one, I'm happy to take a look at that too. Most of the time, though, Terry, I just let my intuition kind of run the show here. And if there's something that I feel is top of mind for me, it's probably top of mind for others. So I just take that process. And I hope really everybody's safe, that you're not being impacted by any of the fires or any of the stuff that's going on right now. And we'll see you next Friday. So there we have it. All right, Terry. Thanks. Right. I hope you have a great weekend, my friend. Take care.
You too. Thanks so much.
Yep. All right, everybody. Thank you. I appreciate your attendance here today. It does mean a lot to me. I look forward to seeing you each Friday, 3 p.m. Pacific time. This is Career Happy Hour. This is where we provide you free coaching support for your career, whether you're working or not. So good. We'll see you soon, hopefully next Friday. Take care.